What's the Scoop episode 3. Sorry, I was not on last night, or last week rather. But I'm excited to be back with y'all tonight. We've got a lot going on in sports right now across all major sports, whether that's baseball. We've got the winter meetings coming up starting tomorrow, I believe, in Nashville. We've got college football, which today there was a massive game. If anybody saw or didn't see it, out of excuse me, out of Bama versus Georgia, and football is kicking into high gear. Obviously, we've got a ton of uh, major playoff implications coming up the next couple of weeks. A couple of teams that are right in the hunt of it. A couple of teams that appear to have pretty much all but locked up their positions in the playoffs this year, and then of course a few teams that have already been looking ahead to 2024. Um, Going into this week, we'll start with baseball. Going into this week, there's been a ton of uh, different discussions about who's going to get moved at the winter meetings this week. Of course, there's always typically a lot of action at these winter meetings uh, for a lot of trades or free agent signings, or one thing or another, waiver claims, what have you. Uh, the names you're hearing mostly right now include the Padres Padres outfielder Juan Soto, free agent out of Japan, pitcher Yamamoto, and then guys like, of course, Shohei Ohtani, who pretty much looms large over the sport right now. The free agency going into about its second month, or just coming up on its second month, is in a position where things haven't really heated up yet. Some of the major names, Cody Bellinger, still out there. We've got a bunch of other players. People are still waiting to hear on what's going with Matt Chapman. But there's been a lot of discussions as to what's going to be going on over the next couple weeks, and a lot of that could happen at the winter meetings. You've got a lot of winter meetings in the past where that is where a lot of these kind of deals occur. And then you've got some. There was one back in, I believe it was 2015. I've actually was at that one where pretty much nothing happened for most of the week because everything was held up. That was when John Lester had just become a free agent off of the year that he was traded from Boston to Oakland, and then he ultimately signed that major deal with the Chicago Cubs. So there's really no telling what's going to happen this week. There's a lot of been back and forth reports this week regarding whether or not the Soto talks will come to a conclusion this week. Whether it's going to take, there was one report that said it could be up to 4 or 6 more weeks before we saw anything come to fruition. But based on the Padres' financial situation and them having to take out loans and clearly looking to cut down on payroll, it's been pretty much widely believed that will be a trade that happens. Jody Moncrief, good to see you, Jody. Hope you're doing well. Are the Yankees going to trade for Alex Bregman? That's not something I've heard. I know that they were open to moving him. Honestly, I think it's more likely at this point, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I feel like it's more likely at this point that you'd see a significant trade between the Yankees and the Red Sox than the Yankees and the Astros right now. I just can't see them coming to a deal, and I certainly don't think that they would send a key piece of their dynasty to the one team that's been closest to, nipping at their heels the last few years, even though there's still definitely a gap between where Houston is and where New York is. I can't see them trading Bregman to the Yankees. I just can't see them doing it. Maybe that's, maybe they don't think that way, because I personally, if I were a GM, I would want the best package available. But I couldn't see those two teams linking up on a deal. Just something about it just would strike me as bizarre. But if he were available, is that somebody that the Yankees should have interest in? Absolutely. I mean, I obviously don't like Bregman, but I'll get over it pretty quickly. I mean, the third base at is position that the Yankees have struggled to get a long-term answer for the last few years. Really since as far back as, I mean, if you want to say even A-Rod, ever since then. I mean, they tried the Euclid thing, which of course that ended up not working out. They tried Urshela, which that was going pretty well until they traded him in that deal with Minnesota. There've been a lot of different guys. I mean, there was a period of time where Eric Chavez was there. That was going back to 10 years ago now. So they could really benefit from making a move for a third baseman. I think that they should be in on Matt Chapman, but I don't know. Bregman seems like it'd be hard for me to believe that that's something that they would do. But again, if it were an option, I'd absolutely go for it. Should the Yankees trade DJ LeMahieu? So here's the thing. I would move off DJ LeMahieu in a heartbeat, but he's on a 6-year, $90 million deal. He's coming off of a terrible year, and he hasn't been what he was the first 2 years he was in New York the last couple of years. And so he's getting up there in age. He's not providing the top of the order value that he once was, and he's still on that $90 million contract. Well, it'd be reduced now to probably about $45 million. But yeah, they should. But at the same time, unless you're packaging prospects or you're eating a chunk of the money, I don't see him having a ton of value on the open market. And if you're going to be eating that money anyway, if you're going to be eating that money for LeMahieu anyway, I frankly would just rather hold on to him and hope that he rebounds. Even though I don't quite know, he might end up being the guy who plays a little bit of time at third base. I know people keep saying he's not a third baseman, and I don't disagree, but that might end up being what they try and do, because I know that he's going to probably spell Rizzo at first base quite a bit, because Rizzo, after starting off incredibly hot last year, fell off the tank about late May, early June, and we obviously know now what happened with the concussions. So hopefully he's back this year. Concussions are obviously incredibly unpredictable. Clint Frazier was never the same after his. A lot of people. You never know how that's going to manifest. So hope he comes back okay for himself first, obviously, and then for the team. But I think that that's probably what he's looking at right now is kind of maybe playing some third and then spelling Rizzo at first base in terms of LeMahieu's role. But yes, I absolutely would look to trade him. But I think that you'd either have to eat money, at which point why are you going to trade him anyway, or you think you'll have to attach some prospects to that. And if you're going to attach the prospects, I'd rather see them go to like a Juan Soto type deal, assuming some of the same guys are asked for. Kurt's chiming in. I'm glad to see you here. Kurt saying, "Scoop, great Bama win." Let me put this up. Great Bama win, but they don't go over Texas. I'm the biggest SEC guy, but if FSU wins, it's Michigan, Washington, FSU, and Texas. So I don't have a ton to say about that. Not because I agree or disagree, but I think a lot of it's riding tonight on the two games happening tonight. So, I mean, this past week we did a sort of a what if scenario on the main show on Wednesday, which broke my brain a little bit because I was just trying to put all these like what ifs together. I'm not quite sure really, because there's still so much that could change just off this games that are happening right now. So I definitely think that I do think that Bama and Texas, if it comes down to them too, obviously I see the very legitimate argument that Texas should be in over Bama, or at least higher than Bama, because they did beat us early in the season. But I think that, and I was just saying this a little while ago, I think if you're looking at what happened today and what the CFP has to look like going forward and what the committee is going to be looking at, which I don't envy their position right now, but I think Georgia has a legitimate argument to be the team that should be on the outside looking in at this point, because I don't see how you leave out Bama. Obviously, like you just said, you can't leave out Texas, and then you're going to leave out potentially 2 or 3 teams that could be undefeated. I don't know. That's a wild scenario. That's going to be potentially even more wild within a couple hours. But I have a hard time, and again, call me a homer, but I just have a hard time leaving Bama out after an unbelievable win today. Kurt says, logo looks awesome. Thank you. And as long as you mention it, logo up here, shout out to my friend from college, Nicole Gizzi. She designed that. She did an amazing job. For those of you who like social media content, photography content involving food, cooking, and all of that, go follow her on Instagram. It's NICS_EATS_, Nick's @Cat_Eats_. She does a lot of that content, and she's always great for some inspiration and some unique kind of dinner hacks, if you will. Jody comes in and says, Sonny Gray to the Cards. Yeah, so he's another great example, and this is the thing, and this is where Kurt is gonna like what I have to say because I'm always big on you try and take as much data as you can and use it as best as you can, but there's also still intangibles, and I'm fully respectful of that. I think Derek Jeter said it great this week where these guys still have heartbeats, and you can't put a number on everything. And I think this is one great example of that. Is you just don't know how a guy's going to play in a place like New York. Playing in New York is brutal. We've heard guys like Joey Gallo basically say that fans came up and harassed him with his family, like while they were out to dinner, which is absurd to me, and I think that that's disgusting. And I completely understand why people don't want to play in New York and why people, have a lot to say about the Yankee fan base because a lot of it is deserved. I say that as a Yankee fan myself. Um, so I look forward to seeing what Sonny Gray does. I do think that St. Louis is a good fit for him. Just not only do they need a front of the line arm like he can be, but also I just think places like Oakland, Minnesota, St. Louis. I don't like saying that they don't have that pressure because St. Louis has a massive winning history. They're one of the most storied winning organizations. Have won the second most championships in baseball behind only the Yankees. So um, I don't think it's fair to say that there's less pressure in a place like St. Louis. I just think that it comes down to the fact that there's that big market and that sort of pressure cooker that New York is. It's just a different place to play from every account that I can share. Um, and I did kind of wonder on a personal level if that had changed a little bit with the emergence of social media, where pretty much everybody, you know, Twitter and Facebook, pretty much everybody can see things if they want to, but at the same time, um, it appears that there is still a scenario in which places like New York just do sit above other places in terms of the level of pressure. And it's so I look forward to seeing if because he's been doing a lot better since he went to Minnesota. He looks a lot more like the pitcher he was in Oakland. And there's just been a lot of players, both pitchers and otherwise, who just in New York were not the kind of player who they're used to being, and he was a prime example of that. So look forward to seeing that. Kurt comes in and says, again, it was Sonny Gray over Verlander. That move cost the Yankees 2 to 3 World Championships. Fireable move. Um, I mean, again, and this is what I always say with moves like this. Yeah, now it looks like a completely terrible move because he had, and again, I'm doing this off memory. I think he had 2 years, 50 million left on his contract, which again, pitchers typically don't age well into their late 30s and 40s. So there were plenty of legitimate arguments that why would anyone touch that? Not why would anyone, but it's a big risk to touch that contract. I mean, remember going back to when he was on waivers, because that's how that deal was made. It was made on the waiver wire. It wasn't made at the deadline. Uh, and he ended up going to Houston. I think it was with like a matter of 7 or 8 minutes left before the deadline. He waived his no trade clause. So, Houston, all the props to them for taking the chance. Idea if it would have worked out the same way in New York. I did understand why they didn't make that move because again, 50 million over 2 years to a pitcher who is of that advanced age, always going to come with question marks. But Houston gambled and it paid off for them. So um, Trevor comes in and how you doing, Trevor? Good to see you. I'm hoping that my Rockies are aggressive at the winter meetings. What is one big move that you see happening at the winter meetings? I do think Shohei Ohtani goes. I wanted to say Juan Soto, but I'm kind of still. I'm less confident on that than I would say on Ohtani, just because Ohtani has pretty much said or looked like the week of the winter meetings was always going to be a timeline for him. He wasn't expected to drag his free agency out for a while, whereas Juan Soto, there's not really a reason that it has to get done this week, and there technically isn't a reason for Ohtani either, but I just think that Ohtani doesn't want to drag this thing out super long. He's not the kind of guy who likes all the fanfare, who likes all the massive attention and whatnot. Um, he is an interesting case because there was a lot of confusion not confusion, but lack of clarity, I guess, in terms of whether or not people thought that he was going to chase the same things that he chased when he came over to the States, which was small market, West Coast, and winning chance to contend. So based on the teams that have been reported as the 4 or 5 teams that are really in the mix for him right now, it doesn't appear that those things are the same now, because the teams that are involved with him now, at least according to what's been coming out, is the Angels are still involved, but it's the LA Dodgers, second biggest media market in the US. It's the Chicago Cubs, third biggest media market in the US. Toronto, massive media market in Canada. Um, and then San Francisco, there's a kind of a back and forth on how involved they are, but another top media market in the US, or at least, if you don't consider them top, they're very close to being considered top. And obviously, a lot of those teams are not in the West Coast. We've got Chicago and Toronto, etc. So it doesn't appear that list is the same if those teams are accurate. But yeah, I think that we'll get a resolution on Ohtani, if not during the winter meetings, then shortly thereafter. I think that that's slightly more likely than Soto at this point. Although I did hear from a league source earlier today that they believe, at least, and again, I did not have this confirmed. This was one person's opinion. Believed that it would happen by as soon as Monday for Soto. So obviously could happen at any time, but you asking me to put money on it, that's where I'm going. I'm going with Ohtani. Jody says, where do you see Trevor Bauer going? I think a lot of that's going to come down to the teams who I think get left in the dust behind guys like Snell and Yamamoto and Ohtani. I think he's still would be considered a second tier starter. I don't think that he's fallen off to the point where he would be, just a guy basically, because he still is, I think, a very, very promising second tier talent. But again, he hasn't pitched in the majors in a couple of years, and we've seen guys with that layoff not come back the same. But he has been pitching, so that may have helped him as well. And in terms of where I think he goes, I could see the Mets having an interest in him because they were in on him before they pulled off, and then he went to the Dodgers. So that's a move I could see Steve Cohen making, because it doesn't sound like they're going to be a finalist for Ohtani. Whether that's from the Mets decision or more his decision, I don't know. But they're not a team that I've heard as a finalist for Ohtani. And for that matter, neither are the Rangers or the Mariners, which was my original pick for him. So it doesn't sound like those teams are going to be involved. So I would probably say the Mets are the team that I would keep an eye on, because there is that past connection there, and I'm pretty sure that it was under Steve Cohen that they originally tried to get him. I know that the GM's different now, but yeah, that's where I would look. Trevor says it should be interesting to see if the Yankees trade for Juan Soto. Seems like the Padres are holding firm in their asking price. If I had to guess, I do think it's going to be the Yankees that ultimately get Soto. I would not have said that a few days ago, but they want young starting pitching. Well, who doesn't? But Padres want young starting pitching for Soto. I think they want either guys who are close to the majors or already in the majors. And there are a few teams that can offer that: the Cubs, Yankees, etc. But the other teams that have what the Padres wanted have reportedly been balking at that price. Then there's reports today that the Blue Jays are coming in hot at the last minute. Well, we don't know if it's the last minute yet, but that they're coming in hot right now, and that the Yankees and the Padres are a bit of a standoff. I see that as a major cat and mouse game. I think it's very interesting that the Blue Jays are the team that came in. That to me kind of feels like something that maybe the Padres leaked to try and get the price up, try and bid the price up for the Yankees. I'm sure the Blue Jays want Soto in their own right, but I think that it makes sense to me if the Padres don't like what the Yankees are offering, and they feel like they're losing leverage, to try and build some of that back up by threatening that, hey, we could send him to a division rival. But I think the Yankees have. If that's what they truly want, I think the Yankees can offer a lot better package than the Blue Jays currently can, centered around that. They don't want to trade Drew Thorpe, the Yankees. They are balking at trading Michael King. So if you can get around a package, Clark Schmidt, Maybe you put a Cortez in there. I love Cortez, so as a fan, I'd hate to, but that's someone else you could look to move. Guys like Brito and Vasquez could be in that deal. Clayton Beater is a guy they just picked up a year or two ago when they traded Gallo to LA. He's someone that they could be in that. So they've got plenty of depth, and people are saying, you're going to ruin your pitching depth. No, the Yankees have more pitching depth, I think, than people realize. Uh, so I think that they can make that deal and still be okay. And I mean, it's a player at a position of need and a young player. I think he's going to be 25 all next season, and obviously one of the premier young talents in the game. I mean, there's not much that you're not willing to offer for him, and I don't think it's going to be. I know that the report was that the Padres are asking for 5 or 6 good players. I don't think that they're going to get anywhere near that because he was moved for a package arguably around there 2 years ago, and now he's the price is going to be higher for him financially, and you're only getting 1 year of control on him. So I think that the asking or the ultimate return on Soto, I think is going to be a lot less than people are expecting. We've got coming in here, Trevor again. The Giants need to land a big fish. Ohtani would be perfect fit in San Francisco. As soon as the Mariners thing was reported that not be happening, I said that same exact thing. So I'm in complete agreement with you on that. I think that they swung and missed on Judge. They went and tried to get guys like Correa. That didn't happen. They've been looking for a real. I said this in an earlier episode. They've really been looking for a face of the franchise for a while now. Even before Posey retired, I think that they were still kind of looking for who could be kind of the draw guy after him, and they don't really have that right now. But also, you've got the fans who are continuing to see them whiff on guys. So I think that that's going to be an issue as well that management has to keep an eye on. Also, you're in the same state now with Dodgers, and again, I know it's a big state, but you've got the Dodgers who don't seem to be going anywhere. The Padres are, we don't know how relevant they're going to be next year, but they're always, interesting the last few years. AJ Preller, if nothing else, he's always at least interesting. So I agree with you on that. And although I could see him landing Matt Chapman, I also think that Dylan Cease gets moved at the winter meetings. That would be a surprise to me. I know that there's been a few teams that have been in on him. I remember, I think the Reds were a team that I saw that was in on him. But I know that Chicago has declared that pretty much everybody's available from the White Sox. So that would be interesting, but I don't know that I'd be super surprised by that. I'm curious to see if your prediction comes right, though. Jody says, did you see Counsell to Marlins as an assistant GM? I think you might mean Gabe Kapler, the former manager of the Giants, because Counsell is the manager of the Cubs. But if that's who you mean, if you meant Kapler, yeah, I saw that. That was a couple days ago, and a few people that I know were surprised by that. I'm not entirely, because I know he was working with front offices. I think he was the Dodgers front office for a little bit. So, and again, I like Kapler. I think that he's gotten screwed a couple times by being let go from certain places. That I think he had more success than he was given credit for, and I think that some of the things that went wrong in those places weren't. I think that he was kind of more of a scapegoat. Unfortunately, I mean, obviously that's the nature of the beast in Major League Baseball as a manager, as it is with coaching or managing in pretty much any major sport. But yeah, I'm happy for Kapler. I don't think it's as questionable or confusing of a move as some people are making it out to be. I rather like it, honestly. And Jody again, Cap, yes, okay. Trevor says once Ohtani signs, we start seeing a bunch of different moves happening. Yeah, I think that all three of them, I think that Soto, Ohtani, and Yamamoto, I think that they're kind of all, the dam kind of has to break with one of them, and then I think that some other stuff will move. I think any one of those guys moving could open the floodgates a little bit. But again, like I said before, I do think that Ohtani is going to be the first one of those to go, and then anybody's guess on the other two. Excuse me, but I do think it's going to be interesting to see what and again, I am a Yankees fan, so I do think obviously the Yankees have to get aggressive this week. The last 2 times that they missed the playoffs, or at least had a significantly disappointing season. '08 and 2013. That's when '08 was just the Burnett, Teixeira, Sabathia offseason, and then 2013 after missing the playoffs was the uh, Tanaka, Beltran, McCann, Ellsbury. That last one obviously went over like a lead balloon, but that offseason, I think that when you have those off seasons and then all of a sudden you've got your worst record in 30 years, I don't think you can sell not having a big off season to your fans. I think that you've got to go out and take, and I'm not saying one swing. I'm thinking you got to take two or three big swings. Um, and it was brought up earlier to me by somebody if whether or not Cashman is kind of going for his job here or trying to win. And frankly, I don't care. I think that Cashman should feel his feet to the fire. I don't think that he should be, oh, I've been here for 25 years. I've got a job until I don't want it anymore. No, I don't think that's how this operates. In a world where Bill Belichick could be getting let go at the end of the season, I don't think anybody should consider themselves 100% safe, uh, especially when you haven't won a title in 14 years. So, but going back to what I was talking about before, getting off of baseball for just a second, going back to football. Today was obviously the championship game for the SEC. It was one of the most highly promoted and most anticipated college football games in recent memory. Georgia had not lost a game in 3 years. They'd had a ton of, they had that vaunted defense, which half of it's on the Philadelphia Eagles now. They had, Coach Smart, obviously one of the smartest, no pun intended, coaches in football of my lifetime. And now, obviously, Carson Beck has really come into his own as a quarterback. So it was really impressive to see the run that they had. But obviously, Roll Tide. I'm incredibly excited to watch them win that game. That was an exciting game, and I'm going to get fired up on this because I should not have drank a full coffee before that game because I didn't get to watch most of it, but I watched the tail end of it, the last few minutes of it, and I was scoreboard watching a little bit, and that game, it felt like Bama was going to put it away fairly early, and then it felt like the momentum was swinging back in Georgia's favor twice, and then it ended up coming down to the final 2 minutes, which I think is what a lot of people expected. Ultimately, was that it was going to go down that route. Now I'm not going to dig into the whole how this should, again, like I said, how this should affect the rankings or whatnot. But man, talk about a game for the ages. That's going to be a game that people are going to remember and be talking about for a long time, and I'm really excited about it. In fact, everybody knows, the Georgia fans. I had a couple chirping at me before the game because, of course, I did. I had them chirping at me all week, actually. And Bama likes to, or Georgia likes to do this thing that they say, call the dogs. So I actually put together a little thing myself. I'll say that I'm responding to the dogs with this one. But here we go. Who stopped that train in its tracks? Milroe and the boys from Alabama. Now no one quieter in the land than the drunk, obnoxious Georgia fans. Roll Tide, roll Tide. We're sick of them dogs. SEC runs through Tuscaloosa, baby, and you talk about fraud watch. We talk about fraud watch on this show. It's the biggest fraud watch in the K&K history if Bama's not in the Final Four and not playing in one of those two games going before the championship this year. So I look forward to seeing what the committee does after the two games tonight. Jody comes back and says, are the Eagles going to sign Zach Ertz? That's one of two free agents I'm watching this weekend. Zach Ertz, who just got released by the Cardinals, which God bless him for that. The Cardinals are a fraudulent organization. He had a bit of a shell of his former self type season this year, but I think a lot of that's, again, he's playing in Arizona and they're pretty much torn up across the board. I think that it's reasonably, I wouldn't say likely, but I think it's a very, very strong possibility that does happen. And I would like to see it happen, especially now that Goddard's banged up. But Howie Roseman has had this long affinity for bringing back old Eagles. We saw him do it Deshaun Jackson a couple times. We saw him do it with a couple of guys on the defensive line a couple times. Vinny Curry, I think, was one of them. I think I don't remember if Trent Cole was one of them, but I'd love to see it, especially since, like I said, they do have a little bit of injury question at that position now. So I'd love to see him do it if they can get it for a decent deal, which I think you should be able to. He cleared waivers yesterday though, so it would be a free agent deal, not a waiver claim. And then the other guy that I'm watching this weekend is Colts just cut Shaq. I almost said Shaq Lawson. Shaq Leonard, former All-Pro linebacker, and it's pretty much the last 3 or 4 days sounded like it's going to be a Eagles versus Cowboys back and forth to try and get him. I know that he met with Dallas first, and then he met with Philly a couple days later. I was honestly nervous that he would come out of that Dallas meeting having already signed a deal, so I was grateful that Philly still got the meeting with him. Would be a major addressing a major need. They seem to always have a need at linebacker for some reason, even though they went out and got a couple of really good ones, both in the draft and veteran guys. They always seem to have a need at linebacker. So I'd love to see that. Of course, I mean, this is not just another guy to go in and plug a hole. We're talking about a guy who, I know he's been, banged up, but we're talking about a guy who's been an all-pro, who's a guy who was a top talent at his position and is still fairly young. So I would absolutely love if they did that. And of course, by Philadelphia getting him, that means keep him away from Dallas, who's your biggest rival, and I still think your biggest competition in the division right now. Even though Washington had a little bit of a couple of games there that they were surprising people a little bit. And then Jody says, Philadelphia Bulldogs, LOL. Yeah, I can't express enough. I'm sure there's video of it on one of my social media, but I can't express enough being an Eagles fan watching the draft with a bunch of other Eagles fans who's been rooting for Alabama since I think I was 6 years old or 7 years old. And every great player from their biggest rival in Georgia and so keeps getting drafted by the Eagles, which obviously it's very smart play to go in and just take guys from the best college program in recent memory. But as someone who hated Georgia for 5 years, it was just like, oh my God, come on. I got guys that I just was rooting my tail off against for the last 3 to 4 years, and now all of a sudden they're on my favorite team in the NFL. So now I've got to do a 180 on them. But I mean, nature of the beast with the NFL, obviously. Excuse me. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing how those two go. But even just across the board in the NFL this year, the team that I think that I'm going to be watching from a distance, I mean, obviously the Bills have had a very disappointing season. Was kind of surprised to hear it come out this week so early that they're expecting that they're going to retain Sean McDermott, who former Eagles coach, by the way, former Eagles defensive coordinator. But I was surprised with that because, again, like I've said before, the trend recently in NFL head coaches is going toward offense, going toward guys who know quarterbacking and developing passing games and such. So the fact that they lost Brian Dable, which looks like a massive loss, even though he's obviously had some struggles with the Giants, but we don't know yet if that's really a coaching issue or a personnel issue or perhaps both. I'm not quite sure if I, in Brandon Beane's position, would retain McDermott. Because again, even I've had my issues with Josh Allen, but he's not, a main source of the problem this year. They let Ken Dorsey go a couple weeks ago, so we don't know how their offense is going to look over the next couple of weeks. But obviously, last week against Philadelphia, that they lost that game, and I don't know. And I know this is not an original opinion, but they're still so Josh Allen dependent when it comes to the running game. They're still struggling with developing the offensive line, and it's just so much evidence that even though they've got a great tandem or a great duo in Allen to Diggs, and going back to my old home in Western New York, you've got all this Allen Diggs political signs. So I'm sure that people are looking forward to seeing that for a long period of time to come. But Allen's not going anywhere. Despite there were some reports about his perhaps not being particularly content with the Bills or in upstate New York, whatever the case may be. Don't think that Diggs is going anywhere anytime soon. And I can't see Brennan Bean, who was the architect of the reason why the Bills got here, to being at least relevant um, after just so many years of either mediocrity or just disappointment. I can't see him being the fall guy, and it just I don't know. I'm not I'm not a huge fan of scapegoating, like I said before, but I do think in this case, I do think that Sean McDermott is the place to look at um, in terms of coaching. Because I mean, even their defense, which was once a top 2 or 3 defense in the NFL, even their defense is not locking people down the way it used to. So I was a little surprised to read that they were so fixated on already deciding to keep him because I question where a lot of your improvement's going to come from if you're not moving off of key people in the front office. You're not moving off of your quarterback, obviously. Uh, and you've gone through what'll be now 3 or 4 different offensive coaches since Dable, and it's not leading to any significant improvement. Trevor comes in and asks how many how many head coaching openings do you think will be open in the NFL at season ends? Schefter said there'd be about 7 to 10 coaches, head coaches fired. That's about the range that I would expect. It's usually around that sort of 6 to 8 range. Couple years, there's been a couple recent years where it's been, a little bit under that, and there was one year recently where it was wild. I think it got up to about 10. I think that I don't personally buy that the Jets are going to let go of Robert Saleh. I think that the Patriots are going to have a coach opening. I think that they're going to part ways with Belichick. I think that I don't see any coming out of the AFC North unless the Browns absolutely bomb the rest of the way. AFC South, I don't see it happening there. It could possibly, the only one that I could really see happening there is if Mike Vrabel ends up being someone that the Patriots look at to replace Belichick. I could see that happening, but I think that would be more of a sort of a trade type of thing that gets worked out. I don't think that the Titans are going to fire Vrabel, although again, not a decision I'm 100% sure that I would make. I think that Vrabel, I think it is time to take a little bit more of a look at Vrabel, but again, your quarterbacks have been Tannehill, Willis, etc. There's only so much of a ceiling you can get out of that as well. So, that one could kind of go either way for me. But I think that Tennessee, New England, I think the Chargers are going to make a move. I think that's going to be the only one coming out of the AFC West. AFC East, I think Ron Rivera is done. I think that I'm torn on what to think about Matt Eberflus because there's just so much dysfunction in the Bears organization that I have no idea what to ever think about them from a coaching standpoint. Because again, you've got that much going on. How much of it is on the position coaches? How much of it is on Justin Fields? How much of it is on their GM? I can't remember his name right now. Ryan Poles, I think, is the GM up there. And then the other two divisions, I think it may come home to roost for Arthur Smith in Atlanta. I definitely see the argument for giving him more time because, again, their roster is just completely battered right now. But I do think it could be. I do think he could be somebody that we see let go. And then Tampa and New Orleans, that division in particular, from top to bottom, the NFC South is so interesting to me because I don't think they want to get rid of Todd Bowles in Tampa, but I think that this may be the offseason that they have the recourse to do it if they so desire. I think that Atlanta, it was a massively touted hire to bring in Arthur Smith a few years ago from Tennessee, but we've not seen, a step forward. And if anything, it looks like it keeps getting worse in Atlanta. So, yeah, I think that if I'm counting correctly, I think that, I'd say that'd probably be around 8 or 9 guys that I could see let go. I can't see anybody that I can think of getting let go from um, the NFC West. So yeah, I think that I named around 8 or 9 coaches there. Those would be the teams that I think are most likely to let go of their guys. Uh, I'm not 100% sure that we'll see any sort of big shock type move. I don't think that unless we get a retirement from somebody like a Carroll or a Tomlin or somebody. I don't think there's going to be that, or Harbaugh or whoever. I don't think there's going to be that sort of major move of firing a coach that nobody saw coming. But I do think that I mean, it's Schefter, so you pretty much don't usually question him to begin with. But yeah, I think he's probably right on in that range. It's saying around 9 is probably the number that I think is the number that I just came up with those teams specifically. Uh, but I think also, I just heard earlier today, and I'm not surprised because he was looked at highly by by teams a few years ago. I heard that pretty much the name this offseason is going to be Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Carson, if you're listening, I hope you guys don't lose him. But he seems like he's going to be the kind of bell of the ball, if you want to call it that. Um, there's already been a couple of teams that are reported to have interest in him. Carolina was one of them, but there's also similar report that also came out connected to that, saying that the Carolina Panthers. I don't know if it was past executives or who it was, but people connected to the Panthers, past or present, have basically been reaching out to Johnson saying, "Hey, if you're looking for your first head coaching job, be careful about looking here." Um, it doesn't sound like the Tepper regime is being warmly received by the people there, the players or the coaches. It seems like he's obviously gotten a reputation already as an impatient owner. I mean, we saw that just happen with Frank Reich. Um, but I think also on top of that, I made the point on the main show about how I don't know why Fitterer is not getting more attention. So I don't know if that extends to him. I don't know if it was just about Tepper or if it extended down further to decision makers in the football side with Fitterer and company. Um, but I do know that a lot of teams are looking at Johnson as a head coaching target this offseason. And I also know that he's been advised to, proceed with caution, basically, when it comes to Carolina. And I assume that he's not going to be the only one for whom that's true. I think that might be why you see, I mean, there's been a lot of reports this week with Greg Olson. And that kind of reminds me a little bit of the situation the Colts had a few years ago with Jeff Saturday, where this former player comes in and takes a not a very desirable job, and tries to do the best that he can with it. D'Amico Ryans, one of my favorite former Eagle defenders, did the same thing with Houston. These jobs kind of go to guys who I don't want to say they're not looked at as coaching candidates, but guys who are pretty much not they're not getting the most buzz, so they're not the most in demand, if you want to say, which, not to disrespect anybody, because a lot of the great coaches have been relatively unheralded in the beginning. So I think that's one reason why you see a lot of the Greg Olson reports, because it just seems like a natural fit there, and there's not really a reason to believe that he'd be a high uh, connector to have a foot in the door with any other job right off the rip. Jody says, "Does Seattle miss Russ?" Um, I mean, right now they probably do, because Geno Smith has regressed a little bit, but right at the same time that Denver took off, but also at the same time, these are the two things that I say a lot that I am careful of when it comes to sports. It's revisionist history, and it's my short-term memory. Yeah, right now they probably miss him a decent amount, but and I don't know that they had. I don't know what they thought of Geno Smith after last year. I don't know if they thought that he was a flash in the pan, or if they thought that he would continue. But even in the beginning of this year, he was doing pretty solid. It was the last few games that he kind of tailed off a little bit. So I think that they would probably miss him just because of how accomplished he was over there and what he meant to that team. But I don't know, because he seems like such a likable guy to me, and he seems like such a great character guy. But a lot of what you heard about him after he left Seattle, in terms of him leading the locker room or him being the quarterback, was not a lot of positive, and it, to a point that really surprised me. So right now they may miss him just because he's doing great and Gino is not, but I don't think it's as obvious as just saying, oh, they would absolutely now again, a lot of that's going to hinge on how the rest of the trade works out, which so far it's not as if that trade has worked out particularly favorable for Seattle. But 5 weeks ago we didn't think it had worked out for Denver, so um, to be determined. I'll put it that way, Jody. To be determined on that one. Trevor Backen says, I could see Dallas moving on from McCarthy. Oh, that's a good one. I didn't pick up on. That's a good one. Depending on how far they go in the playoffs. The one issue I have with not that I have with it, but the one issue that I could see with that is they let go of a couple guys or didn't pursue a couple of guys because Jerry, Steven, and company, that whole nepotistic web they've got up there in the front office, because Jerry doesn't like guys that he can't control. That's why he let go of Jimmy Johnson 30 years ago, and that's why he's not won anything of note in the last 30 years. Jerry likes to keep his thumb on the scale, and he likes people around him who are. I mean, it's literally a lot of the front office and the people in positions of I don't want to say priority, but positions of impact, I guess, and influence. A lot of them are his family, his friends, guys that he and with that means he's going to have that outsized influence. Now, I know a lot of owners in sports have outsized influence, but it's so apparent that he's got such a level of it. And I don't think that his ego is going to let him say McCarthy was entirely my hire and it didn't work out. I mean, he kept Jason Garrett for, 10 years, when Jason Garrett never did anything to show that he was a Super Bowl, a coach that could lead you to a Super Bowl. And his best year was that one year that Dallas had an incredible offensive line. Ezekiel Elliott looked like a beast. So I think he should be on the hot seat, but I think that Jerry Jones and his ego alone will be the reason why he sticks around. Do you see the Raiders keeping Pierce as their head coach? I could really see it, and quite honestly, I wish more teams did that, gave their interim coaches who have success anyway, or at least look like they're having a positive impact, which, I mean, it was pretty apparent how highly the players thought of him pretty quickly, and I'm sure, in contrast, how glad they were to be out from Josh McDaniels. It doesn't appear that there was any love lost between him and the players. So, I if I'm that front office, I'm giving him and I almost said Champ Bailey. I can't remember his name, to be honest, but I'm giving that the GM and the head coach at least through next year, see what they can do, because they're an absolute tire fire. And then they brought in Jimmy G to replace Derek Carr. I didn't understand that decision. Then Jimmy G goes and gets hurt, so they've got to put Aiden O'Connell in there, who looks great for a couple games, but then of course he regresses because that's just what happens with young quarterbacks. So yeah, I definitely think that he's worth giving a look for give him a full off season to implement his stuff, give him a draft to have whatever influence you want to give him, given that training camp, OTAs and whatnot. Definitely, if I'm in the position of their front office, I'm definitely giving him, because I think it's just shown over the last few years that continuity. I mean, a lot of coaches did not start out. I mean, if you had told me, I'll just use my example, as following Philadelphia. If you had told me that Doug Peterson leading well, first of all, I didn't know who Doug Peterson was when they hired him, and then when they hired him, I had wanted, he was not even a guy top of my list. When they hired him, I was like, like not upset, but it was pretty a mediocre hire to me. And then they went 7-9, so no way that I would have thought that after that they would have won the title the next year. I think that there's a lot of teams where you have a mediocre season or two, and they pull the plug all automatically. The Raiders in particular, with the amount of changes they've had, I think that they've had more turmoil over the last 10 to 15 years than even the Cleveland Browns and Jacksonville Jaguars have had, which is hard to do. So, yeah, roll with it for at least a year. In Trevor's opinion, he can see Dan Quinn getting a head coaching job this coming up coaching cycle. Definitely think that's a possibility. Now, I talked about offensive coaching earlier and the trend toward that. I do think that Dan Quinn is somebody who makes sense as a defensive head coach. Obviously, he's been a head coach before. He's got solid experience with defense both in Dallas and going back to his days in Seattle. Obviously, there's the infamous, outcome of what happened in Atlanta, but I don't think that his whole resume should be defined by that. I think that he makes sense for a couple of teams. He may make sense for a team like Chicago that they love their physicality. They love we do it old school. We're defense and running game and whatnot. We do it like we do it like it's like colleges in the NFL basically. So I could see that being a fit because he fits that style, but he also comes in with a level of respect and authority that I think that perhaps they could use in Chicago. So that's a match that just off the top of my head, I could see making sense. They should give Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly. I kept wanting to say Champ Bailey, and obviously I knew that wasn't right. At least another full year. Completely agree. The big hires haven't worked. The Raiders also owe Gruden and McDaniels. I still cannot believe that when Gruden hadn't won or even coached in several years, they went out and what was it, $100 million contract for 10 years or something like that? Wild. Absolutely wild to me. But that's what the Raiders do. They go out and I don't even like to say take big swings, but they just go out and they take big reaches, I guess, is what I would say. Because, the last few years, the one stability thing that they had was Derek Carr, who pretty much single-handedly got that team through at least 2 or 3 different times of just pure chaos. And, they go and send him over to New Orleans and replace him with Jimmy Garoppolo, which is just such a Raiders move to do. You go and you take somebody who you pretty much know what you're going to get week in and week out, year in and year out, and you go and get the player who you probably least know at quarterback what you're going to get week to week out, whether it's production or health or whatever. Like perhaps the riskiest acquisition. And I know it's Las Vegas, but usually when you go to Las Vegas, if depending on how much you gamble, usually eventually the odds start to come. If you start off slow or cold, eventually you hope that you kind of come back to the middle a little bit. They've not come back to the middle since maybe going back to Al Davis. Like it's insane to me how they keep just missing on these guys, both at front coach and quarterback. You said you could see Quinn as a fit with the Chargers. Their defense has been a big problem this year. Talent is there. Completely agree. I could see LA keeping Kellen Moore as Quinn's OC as well. If they bring in Quinn as if they bring in Quinn as head coach, he definitely would need to have a dynamite OC. Because again, Justin Herbert, which that's another guy I talked earlier about. Now I'm not saying it's apples and oranges, beyond this one point, but the fact that the fact that he, like I said with Scott Fitterer over in Carolina, he just seems like he's immune to criticism. I don't understand. We've seen quarterbacks have to work with a lot less than he has. Now, again, I know that the coaching has sometimes been headache-inducing when it comes to decisions by Brandon Staley and company. But on top of that, we've seen a lot of quarterbacks come through and at least have some level of success and be able to carry some level of dysfunction beyond a certain level. And Carr got the Raiders, who are notorious for dysfunction, as I keep saying, to the playoffs. I think it was twice, and they never had an elite, really anything that I can remember in terms of position groups or anything like that. And the fact that Justin Herbert, I don't know, I give him. He's obviously very talented, but the you see on social media those kind of bar graphs where it's like, you know, who's the guy that has this much talent and this much production or this much notoriety and this much talent or whatever the case. A guy that I think has this level of talent but this level of production would be Justin Herbert. I mean, he's had some really good games, but can you do it in the big moments? I've not seen, which you can argue that the Chargers haven't had a lot of big moments for him to have the experience in, but I don't know. And maybe it's just because he's gotten beaten down by the fact that he was in, he runs into Kansas City twice every year. But even that, I mean, at some point, I don't want to hear all these excuses when a lot of other quarterbacks have to deal with a lot worse, and are able to at least put up some level of consistent, second tier production at least. That's all I'm looking for. And I don't know. I just feel like Justin Herbert is not somebody who gives me the level that told that I'm supposed to expect from him, from what his arm and his mind and his size and whatnot. I'm told that he's supposed to be Josh Allen. And as much as I criticize Josh Allen, I do at least get a lot of the good games from him. I just get a lot of boneheaded mistakes, but I get a lot of the good games from him. And I don't see a lot of the big. Not everybody can do this, or only he can do this from him, that from Herbert, that I'm told that I'm supposed to expect. And it's not like this is a year one or year two quarterback. I think we're coming up on the end of his fourth year. So I want to see more from Herbert, especially if they go in and get a new coach and offensive coordinator. I think that he's somebody who I think has a lot to prove next year. I think he's one of those. I don't know if I would say hot seat necessarily, but definitely somebody who, in my mind, just for me as a whatever you want to call me, as fan, and then someone who analyzes or like just researches or whatever you want to say, um, as someone who looks at the game that way, he's someone that I definitely want to see more from next year. Um, got about 2 minutes left on air, so thank you to the guys who have been on all show. Thank you, Trevor. You had a lot of great both questions and things to say. Message me if you want to come on the show at some point. Would absolutely love to have you. Jody, thanks for being as active as always. Always love whether it's Houston or just general questions or one thing or another. I look forward to seeing what both of our teams do in the winter meetings this week, and then of course beyond. Kurt, thanks for chiming in earlier. Glad that you were able to make it for a little bit. And anybody else who was on, again, thank you very much for coming in and listening and engaging. Very, very excited to see what happens going forward this week. Not just with the things that I mentioned, which obviously the winter meetings and what happens after tonight with college football. But NBA is in full swing now. NHL, which we didn't cover today, but I'm sure in the next couple of weeks I've got guys who will come on and talk a lot of hockey and a lot more, some of the sports that we haven't covered yet so far. But appreciate everyone who tuned in for episode 3, and I'll give it one more minute before I sign off here, because I do have another minute left. So in case anybody wants to ask a final question. Trevor says, I'd love to come on sometime. I appreciate all of your hard work. Keep it up, man. Great show. Thank you so much, Trevor. Yeah, just again, you've got me on Facebook. I don't know you. I don't know if you have other contact info for me, but just private message me on Facebook, and we'll get in contact. I won't be doing the show next week, by the way, y'all. I start my final exams on Monday for law school for my first semester. So both Wednesday I will not be on the main show, and next Saturday I will not air What's a Scoop. But that only means that I'll be doing, I'll be back twice as hard 2 weeks later, 2 weeks from now on the 16th. So looking forward to that. Seeing as there appears to be no further comments, again, thank you guys, and looking forward to episode 4 of What's a Scoop and everything else that happens going forward, and seeing what happens with Ohtani in baseball, Soto, Yamamoto, and then of course in free agency in football. the two guys, Ertz and Leonard. Hope to have them both in Philly in the next few days. So thanks, guys. Scoop out.